Jim, have you ever considered the similarities of casting on a new project and casting a spell?
Oh, huh. That's interesting. Yeah, casting on is kind of fun. I remember learning that. And
Mm-hmm.
casting a spell. They're so
Yeah.
similar. I have a lot of correspondences immediately in my head.
They both come at the beginning before you do the work, but there's still work to do before you do the casting on of the
Yeah.
thing or the
w-
casting.
We cast a circle. So that's kind of the casting on. You don't have to create a magical circle to do spell work or to do magic. But if you do, one of the things is cast a circle. And I think
Oh,
about that being the magical perimeter. And I think about the cast on is like the perimeter of your work.
yes, I think that is very valid. Join us in this week's episode as we dive into this very topic.
So cool.
Light from Lantern presents Knit a Spell. I'm Magical Maker, Katie Rempe.
And I'm the maker of magic, James Devine.
Join us as we stitch together the symbiotic relationship between crafting.
And the craft.
How do you prepare to cast, like a spell or a project? And let's just talk about that word a little bit to begin with. Cast.
Yeah. What does it mean to cast? One of the definitions is to toss or to throw. And there's an implication of the thing will be moving away from you. If I have a stone and I cast it into the pond, I am taking that stone and I'm throwing it into the drink, right? There is this sort of implication of letting the piece go or letting the work go. That's hugely important in magic. If you have a lust for results, if you hold too tightly on to what you want, it's really tough to make that happen. Have to have
Yeah.
a little bit of release, a little bit of let go in order
Yes.
for it to actually work. So that word cast is fascinating to me. And I think about that with knitting, right?
Yeah,
Why
I never
why
thought
isn't
about
it
that.
why isn't it bind on and cast off?
Yeah, great point. And I never even considered that. Yes, you cast it on and then you're slowly knitting it away from you. I never thought about that.
So
Oh,
there's something
interesting.
super magical about that term to me from an outside perspective. You never really think about it when you're a knitter. When we cast a circle, so if we're going to compare it, circle casting is a way to delineate magical space, saying that within this circle or within this space, I'm going to be doing magical work. It's a way to fill that space with your intention, to protect the space, to ward against what you don't want, and to fill that space with a bubble of what you want to have happen. And so
Mm.
you're just pushing all of the spiritual dust bunnies out and you're just clearing the space. And really, people used to do it with brooms because they would sweep their floors
Right.
and literally sweep the dust out or the dirt out. So there
Mm.
is a magical act with that. But this is creating that clearing and making the magical space for your intention.
I think about how that basically is similar for the knitting as well. It's a quick portion of the project, but it
Same.
is essential to do well because that quite often is one of the parts that people can see, like it's an edging. So if it's sloppy or if it's too tight or if it's too loose, like that can have a
Right.
really big impact. So it could be worth your while if it's not done to your liking initially to just go back and redo it. Otherwise, you're already putting feeling into your project where you're like, I already know there's something wrong with it. Now I don't want to do it anymore. Now maybe I'll never finish it.
Yeah, no kidding. I think that's a really interesting, like the quality of your cast.
Ooh, you
Right.
better check your quality of your cast.
Yeah. Check your cast before you wreck your ass.
How do we go about doing that? What are some ways to cast with care or with good energy?
When we cast a magic circle, there is this sense of really feeling the energy coming through you. And then as you trace a circle or trace something into the air or around you in some way, whether you're laying down a cord, whether you're stacking rocks around you, whether you're doing salt or water or whatever the thing is that you're doing to create a magical space, that you are really watching and imagining the energy just flowing up and creating this bubble. And
Mm.
so that is a lot of the visualization that one does. And when the magical circle is constructed, boy, you really can feel it. So some
Mm.
people will do a warding circle first to say we sweep out anything that we don't like, and then
Hmm.
they'll cast a circle to delineate it and to protect it. So there's different ways to do that, and different traditions do it. There could even just be you and saying, okay, I'm in my bedroom. This is my top of my dresser. This is my altar. And behind me, my bed's not made and there's laundry on the floor and all that. So, doing a little 10-minute tidy and then saying, this is magical space, light a little incense or spray a little room spray or whatever. This is magical space, and just push the energy into a bubble around you and around your altar. That's a simple way to do it too.
That's a great way to do the same thing, even if you're knitting. It could just be the chair that you're choosing to craft at, but within that space, you have your circle, your bubble of protection around you. And within that space, the only thing that matters is whatever intention is you're knitting into your project, or
Yes.
the energy you want to have while you're knitting, whether or not
Right.
it's intended to go into it or not. You just want to
I,
like enjoy the knitting.
yeah. How many knitters have delayed or have said, oh, I can knit off the skein. I don't need to ball the yarn. And that it can just sit in my bag and pick up all of the notions and whatever get tangled up in it as I'm knitting. I know you're cringing, but
You only
right.
do that once.
I happen to know knitters and crocheters that are in my life who might, you're
They knit off
eventually,
of the skein without rolling it into a ball?
I know.
Wow, they're really flying from the hip, knitting from the hip, knitting from the skein. That's crazy. So
How
bold.
dare, now we're
So
going to
bold.
have listeners who are like, I'm
I
offended.
I do that.
I knit. But if you knit from the skein, you know what you eventually have to do.
You're
You
running a
got to
risk.
ball that up
Before it balls itself up.
before you're just knitting a knot.
Much harder to knit through a knot if you're not intending to knit your own knots.
And
So.
they get those great big sort of knots and they flop over with the rest of the
Oh
yarn.
yeah, it's a real Christmas light situation, and it does not make it conducive for wanting to knit.
No.
Yes,
So
knots
that's
great to
another
use to block
way.
things.
Yeah. So if you're balling your yarn by hand or with a machine, that can be magical. What would it be like to ball your yarn in a magical way? That's the preparation for the casting and for getting ready to cast. So that's some of the things that people can do.
That's a good point. Let's talk about how the casting, it doesn't just start there. Quite often, we have to do a little bit of preparation before that, which, at least for knitting, gather the materials. It's a lot harder for me to just be like, hey, right now, I'm going to go knit a sweater. I hope I have some stuff. I probably do have enough stuff because I have a ridiculous amount of things. But for most normal people, they might want to be like, oh, I have a particular pattern for a particular person that I have in mind, or because of my skills or
Yeah.
desires to knit.
And that's the same. If you're going to do a spell, and I've done this with you when we did that candle magic episode way in the beginning with
So
Katie
fun.
Learns Magic, we
Yes.
had all the supplies laid out already. So the first thing we did was gather the supplies.
Yep.
Then we had breathing and focus on our intention and create a magical space. Then we crafted. And then to cast the spell, to actually do it, we might do that again and then actually light the candles. I think about how do you keep the energy flowing through either your knitting project or through your magical project is have all the stuff ready instead of having to stop in the middle and be like, where the hell is this thing? That'll really interrupt
Absolutely.
the flow, right?
Set yourself up for success. It's like cooking and having all the ingredients chopped up and ready and pre-measured out, or at least pulled out of the pantry, so that you're not just constantly running around, because it's very easy to lose momentum on things, even things we want to do and like doing. And what kind of tools do you use to help you cast?
It depends what I'm doing. I love candle magic. So if I'm going
Mm.
to do like a candle spell, then I'm going to gather all the things I need for that. A plate to put the candles on, herbs
Mm.
and oils in order to dress the candle, intention paper to put underneath the candle plate, a lighter. I'm going to make sure my altar is ready for what I'm doing. Am I doing something for love and I have a statue of Aphrodite, or am I doing something for success and prosperity? I might choose Hermes, whatever the thing is. So these are some of the tools based on what I might do. If I'm going to be doing pouches with herbs, for instance, I want to make sure that I have the pouch and the cord and the herbs and everything ready. If we're going to create sigils, I want to make sure I have the paper and the markers. Doesn't it sound just like setting up for a knitting project?
Yeah. Key to success here is just preparing ahead of time so that when you do get to the starting portion, you can just enjoy the process and really get to work, which is really the whole point, I think.
The thing that I think we don't really talk about that much is this idea of raising energy.
Mm.
So, one of the things that I suggest people do and that we do as a group in our coven is when we do a working of some kind, we raise energy to activate that spell.
Mm.
So, once I've created the candle spell, or once I've made the sigil, maybe that sigil or that piece has an intent around healing, right? Or love or success or whatever it is. There's a way to then raise energy and put energy into it, light the match and get it going. There's many ways to do that. One can chant up into a crescendo, higher and higher energy. You can dance again, up and up. And then when you're at a peak, before you get too tired, when you've peaked and you're dancing, you can then all fall down. It's like that
That's
fun
right. The nurse or
kids
the nursery
game.
rhyme or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah.
you just then put that energy into your piece, right? People can do that with any physical activity, including sex, also can be very powerful. So there's all kinds of ways to energize something with that sort of raising of energy and then putting the energy into your piece. I think that's something that isn't necessarily done with knitting, though it
Mm.
could be fun to do during the blocking phase, I guess.
I can think of certain aspects, perhaps, when people are raising energy for knitting. Maybe not entirely aware of it, but groups that are doing prayer shawls or squares or things
Oh,
like that. So, that sort of almost coven esque aspect where they're praying into a thing, or prayer shawls, also chemo caps, and of course, activism, the pussy hats, and anytime
right.
we're knitting for the cause, that also becomes a time where we are raising the energy and putting it into a thing. So,
Yeah, at the
um,
Women's March, when everyone was making pussy hats, there was a collective energy to tap into for that. You
oh
could
yeah,
feel it. Everyone is making these pink hats, and there's instructions on the internet on how to do it, even easy ones,
yep,
right? Whether you're knitting or whether you're just folding fabric.
right,
um, there was such a shared, and you can tap into that. And as you put that hat on in
mm-hmm,
response to the grabber by the,
that's
pussy
right.
comment, yeah, we owned it. We took it on, we owned it, we marched, and it was in solidarity with everybody. That's a great example of a shared energy that was so
Mm,
palpable and electric. And
yep,
so, what you can do with that when you're making a prayer shawl, when you're making hats with a group, anytime you're in your Stitch and Bitch
right,
group, this is a time for you to tap into the shared energy. We already are, but the shared energy of everyone working on something. And then you imagine that flowing through your hands, through your needles into the piece, kind of
mm-hmm,
see the piece vibrating with that energy.
yeah, it's really cool.
And then releasing the energy into the work is important. So, how do you can raise energy by doing
Mm,
something, but then how do you get the energy into the actual work is really, again, through imagination, through imagining that energy flowing in. And then you need to visualize letting it go. And so, part of what is really magical about spell work, about casting magic, is the level to which you're willing to let something go and let the magic work. I'm curious about casting on, like knitting. I know how to cast on. Are you telling me that there's multiple ways to do it?
Oh, this might come as a surprise, but yes, there are so many cast on methods and reasons that you would use them all. So I thought it would be fun for our upcoming second half if we chatted about a bunch of them and then came up with some correspondences that could match. So
Oh, I love that. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, let's do that.
awesome. We'll be right back. Hey, Knit a Spell fans, we are back on Patreon with a new dedicated page. For just $5 a month, you'll gain access to behind the scenes posts, exclusive downloads and resources, and you'll be able to participate in influential polls with fellow fans. You'll also receive a free, exclusive Knit a Spell sticker sent right to your door after being a subscriber for 3 consecutive months. It's a great way to support the podcast, and Jim and I are so appreciative to everyone who's joined so far. To learn more and sign up, visit patreon.com/knit a spell. See you there.
Hey, Katie, you took my intro to palmistry course.
Sure did.
Why would you recommend it? Or would you?
I, well, first of all, absolutely I would. Maybe I'm biased, but I don't think so. It, for me, was very empowering. It shined some light on how I tend to be personally self critical, and you were really able to help me break that habit by looking at patterns as not things that are wrong, but just things that you can work with. The minuses became pluses, and I think that was something that really was very empowering.
I'm really glad you said that. This is one of my major ideas is palmistry and tarot and other things reveal patterns, not predictions. And to be able to also look at your own hand and transform and reframe your perceived character defects or your self-critical analysis and look at that as a tool that's super useful and can be very positive for you, I think that's an amazing thing to do.
And having it apply to a practice that is traditionally fairly fatalistic, your approach of the Divine Hand method is so positive. I would recommend it to anyone who's interested in palmistry to any degree.
Totally.
And where can they go to find out more?
You, listener, can learn the Divine Hand palmistry method at your own pace with my brand new palmistry course. Go to intro2palmistry.com to read more information about it and to sign up.
Hey, knitters. You know, Jim and I talk an awful lot about all of the patterns that I design on the show, but we don't always mention where you can get them. All of my patterns are available on Ravelry. Odds are, if you're a knitter, you're already familiar with this website. However, if you're not on Ravelry, that is not a problem. You can still just send me an email to hello@lightfromlantern.com with which patterns you're interested in, and I'll help you make it happen. Thank you so much for your continued support, and remember that you can always stay up to date on the latest news and coupons by signing up for my newsletter at lightfromlantern.com. Merry May! All right, Jim, are you ready to go over some of these cast-ons and then chat about them in terms of correspondences-ness?
I'm ready.
It's a word.
I'm ready to do the correspondences-ness.
Perfect. Okay. So I have them listed here for us to review, and I'm actually going to go out of order a little bit.
Okay.
To keep you on your toes.
On my toes.
Yes. First off, I want to chat about the knitted cast on because, in my personal opinion, I believe that's the best cast on to teach people because you're learning how to do the cast on, which is putting the stitches on, but essentially this particular cast on is basically a knit stitch that you're doing with just the one needle.
Is that what you taught me?
Yes. So that helps you learn how to do the knit stitch, which then is usually the next step. So cast on, knit stitch.
What are some of the feelings with, and what do you usually do with the knitted cast on?
The knitted cast on is really nice for new knitters and it's relatively stretchy. So it's pretty good for anyone, any kind of a project. It's a good go-to.
I see. So does it create a border?
Not like any sort of special looking border. It's real simple, real basic.
If you're going to knit a swatch, you're just going to knit cast on.
Yep, very good to do that one. I also like it because you don't have to guess at how long of a tail to leave when you're casting on. So in some cast on methods, you have to estimate a length of yarn to put all the stitches on. And if you estimate it wrong, you could end up having to pull it all out and do it all again. That's why I like this particular method because that is not an issue because of the way you consume the yarn to put the stitches on.
So what are some magical correspondence we could associate with the knitted cast on?
I feel like grounding is a really good one for this. Like it's the basic cast on that I would teach people. So this is a good like foundation grounding situation.
Yeah. So it's foundational, it's grounding. I think there's also the idea of simplicity.
Yep. Ease.
Yeah. If you wanted to bring ease into, yeah, that's good. Is it faster or slower than other methods?
It's probably one of the faster ones because some of these on this list are definitely slower.
So that would be good if you wanted to do something that is an expedited, like you want this to be fast. Sometimes the timing is important. The magical correspondence would be faster speed of the spell happening. Yep. So you would say an expedited, so faster speed of the spell.
I like that.
Those are great correspondences with the knitted cast on. What's another one?
The next one we're going to do is the cable cast on.
Ooh, tell me about that. What's a cable cast on?
It's very similar to the knitted cast on, except instead of basically knitting the stitches onto the needle, you are going in between the stitches to create a stitch to go on the needle. And it makes a more substantial and tidier edge than the knitted cast on. So it's easier to have a really good looking secured foundation. But what I think is really cool and could be part of the magical correspondent is how you go in between the stitches to bring up a new stitch, as opposed to the other one, which is just duplicating it. This one, you're like sneaking in.
So that in between the stitches, what would you correspond that with magically?
Maybe this would be more of like a security thing. Like you're going to feel like a hug because you're sort of like hugging around the stitches to make another one. What do you think?
Could we use this for magic that is protective or creates a more secure boundary or is
Ooh,
warding
yeah.
in some way?
Yes, I think that's a good one. More security.
So if I wanted to create boundaries around something, maybe this is the one that I could use.
Yeah, the boundary maker, the cable
Yeah,
cast on.
I love that. Okay,
I like it.
cool. Now which one?
Okay, next we're going to do the long tail cast on.
Okay.
This is the number one cast on for all projects. Typically, if it doesn't say to do anything in particular, this is the one that you do. Now, this is not the quickest way to cast on stitches, but it's also not the slowest way. So I would say it's a mid. It's also mid in terms of complicatedness. So while I always aim to teach newbies this particular cast on method, it can be a little bit overwhelming because you have to use two fingers on one hand and it's like a weaving situation to get it in there. And by doing this process to get the stitches on in this way, you're actually knitting the first foundational row. So you're putting on the stitches and knitting the first row. This is really about building foundations. It's like having universal blood. So if you don't know what to use, this is the one to use. It's like the general catch-all of energy, almost a jump start. It feels like it's going slow, but then you realize you're already one row in.
The time you put in is not wasted because you have that second row already done. Yep. So magical correspondences, I think medium speed, building foundations, and all purpose, like that's a really good thing. Like white candles can be very all purpose candles.
I think because the way you put it on, you have to do this like bobbing and weaving to get it in there. Like this is another one where if you're doing things maybe that are a little more complicated or you're trying to put two things together, this could be a good one because you're like going from your thumb, which could be your action around the thing, and then your finger, which is the way you're going to do it, your way you're leading through it, as we know from you, thankfully. And so that could really be part of it is like your action and your leadership in terms of what you plan to create with this project, since those are the fingers that are really involved.
That's what I like. I really like that with the fingers.
Hmm.
So action and leadership, because you're also saying getting a jump start
Yep, there
on
we go.
things. I love that. So let's have the long tail cast on can be around doing the work that leads to the action and leadership.
There we go.
Oh, that's awesome.
The next one, we're going to do the I chord. So we were just talking about chords in our last episode. The I chord, as I was saying before, is like 3 stitches that you knit in the round. It's really annoying and it makes this long chord. However, you can also do it as a cast on. It's a way of basically casting on the stitches while creating the I chord. This is a long one. This takes a long time. It's not necessarily easy to get it really even, but it is beautiful when it's done. And it creates this really amazing finished edge. It looks like piping. And so it's great. Like I've made cowls before where there's I chord cast on each edge and the bind off. And so it just looks super finished, just like it's a tube within a tube.
Yeah. What would you correspond that with magically?
This one could be like a strong, handsome finish. It's got like a masculine energy to it somehow. It's protective, it's secure,
So I'm saying it takes time, so there's skill.
Mm,
So what about these words? Skill, strong, handsome finish, masculine beauty, protective, secure.
love it.
That's cool.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, sort of, is the Pico cast on.
Picot is
Yes.
how that's spelled. It's not
Yeah.
picot.
I guess it could be picot if you want it to be.
Is it
But
flanche?
oui, et flanche. The Pico Edge is bobbles at the end. So this is another one that takes time to make because you're making it with these like little bubbles at the end. Actually, I might have an example right here. Hold on. I do indeed. You can do this in a bind off or a cast on in this particular instance, and it makes these little points at the end.
Wait, you
Little
have to hold it
picos.
still. Oh, that's so beautiful.
Here we go. Ta-da.
Yeah.
So they're like just almost like little embellishments. But this is another one that takes a long time because each stitch you have to build up as you're casting it on. This is another slow process. However, each one could be used for meditation. It's also fun because it's frilly. Because of that, I find it to be a little bit more feminine. But again, you do you. I just feel like it's whimsical. There are little wishes in there, much like I used to think of baubles.
I can see this being decorative, beautiful, frilly, feminine beauty, whimsical, can bring in those energies. Do you use the Pico Edge?
I have the bind off on my ship to shore shawl, but it's not a cast on.
Oh,
But you
so the
can do
bind
it as
off
a
is
cast on.
Pico. Got it.
I
That's really
love picos. Picos are just like so much fun. I use them all the time. Last but not least, and honestly, there's a ton more. We could always do a part two at some point.
yeah.
The last one is the provisional cast on. And this one is a lot of fun, Jim. You know why? You don't know
Why?
why. I'm going to tell you
Why?
why. Because it is a cast on that is intended to be removed for reasons. I use a method that applies the stitches with a crochet hook because I think it's easier. So you actually use a crochet hook to put the stitches onto a knitting needle. It's like you're going around it to secure them.
Like you're slip knotting the.
Yes. You're like chaining on stitches onto the needle. And so it's great because let's say you are doing a project that's going to be a tube, but you want to knit it in this direction from side to side long ways instead of going in a tube up. What you do at that point is you start with the provisional cast on, you knit the whole thing, and instead of binding off, you take out that cast on edge, and then you have live stitches on both sides and you can seam them seamlessly together at that point.
So you knit them together.
Yep, exactly.
And then really it's the edges on either side of the strip of fabric that you made that is really the what would have been the bind off or whatever, but it's really just your edge.
Right. Or some people aren't sure of the length of something. And so they'll put a provisional cast on at the hem of a sweater when they're making it. And then if they're like, oh, nope, this is not long enough, they can just pick up the stitches and then knit down that way for a while. And there's all sorts of reasons why you might want to do that. You can use provisional casting on just to make live stitches to then knit like pockets into things and all sorts of fun stuff. The power of the provisional cast on, which is like a redo, like remove and keep going, like a roadblock. I'm putting this in here to remove later on purpose. This is just a space holder.
Yeah, so I see the magical intention around flexibility. It seems like it also has creativity
Yep.
to it because there's so much you can do with it. You said fun, but that's because it's what's fun about it is, oh, you can do so much. So it's also a utilitarian or useful.
Totally. Yes.
Flexibility, creativity, usefulness. What would be some other words that really capture its essence, its magical essence? Transitory.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say liminal.
I love liminal.
Could also be good for border removal because you're taking out that first step.
So removing blocks and boundaries. Cool.
There you go.
I love this. Wouldn't it be cool to have a reference guide for this?
Oh my gosh, you're totally right. In fact, I have one that you listeners can download. And you can do so by finding the link right in the description of whatever you're listening to or watching us on YouTube, however you might be consuming this particular episode, so that you too can know some of the correspondence that we discovered today, so that you too can apply them and add your own as you discover what you also like to apply for each of these cast-ons. And we'd like to know. So let us know. Comment or email us, knitaspellpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
And if you can't find the link, just go to patreon.com/knit
a spell. Find it all there.
So what are your takeaways, Katie, from this episode? I think we're both learning together.
Oh, yeah. I had only really laid out the foundations of which cast-ons we were going to talk about and having some basic ideas about what might be magically inclined towards that. So to have some live on the air banter and brainstorming, that's been my favorite part. How about you?
Yeah, the realization I had through doing this episode with you was that idea of casting implies release.
Yes.
Like when we start something, we have this idea that we will release it in some way. And I had never really thought about that before this episode. And I'm glad that knitting helped me learn a little bit more about magic. I just think it's amazing.
Just like this episode, which we'll be casting out soon, now that we're almost done recording it.
It's called podcasting, not pod binding.
Oh, good point, Jim. It's like we planned that and we didn't. He's just so freaking smart. Be sure to tune in next week when we'll be talking to our special guest author, Diana Rachel, all about her new book, Hex Twisting.
Diana Rachel's so cool. Stay tuned for next week. And as always, thanks for listening to our podcast.
And we will see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for
listening.
If you enjoyed the show, consider sharing it with a friend, leaving a review on iTunes and Spotify, or following Knit a Spell on Instagram.
You can also subscribe to the Light from Lantern YouTube channel to enjoy full episodes of Knit a Spell and see our happy faces.
You can also learn more about readings, classes, and events going on with your favorite maker of magic, James Devine, by visiting thedivinehand.com and subscribing to his newsletter. Then follow Jim's fun and interactive Instagram account @DivineHandJim.
Keep up with Katie, the magical maker, by subscribing to her newsletter at lightfromlantern.com. You'll receive a free knitting pattern as a thank you gift. Then follow Katie on Instagram at lightfromlantern for even more magical making tips. See you next week.